Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out this morning. One of the most rewarding things a police officer can do is solve a case and bring closure to a victim. In this particular case, the victims have waited 20 years for that closure. They have lived every day since with a sense of unknown and uncertainty. Today, I can proudly say we can bring that closure to them. On Thursday, July 20th, 2023, David Edward Hollowell was taken into custody and on an arrest warrant for the preliminary charges of rape, child molesting, burglary, and attempted murder committed in April 2003. I would like to thank Detective Major Jason Brody for his reopening this case and working so hard to bring Hollowell to justice. Keep in mind, Major Brody was not even a member of this department when this crime occurred. His commitment to the citizens of Charlestown and his determination for seeking justice is the only reason this case was solved. I'm now going to open it floor to Mayor Treva Hodges for a few brief remarks.
Thank you, Chief. On behalf of the City of Charlestown, we are incredibly proud of the work that Major Brody and his team have put into solving this long overdue case. It's incredibly rewarding for us as a community to know that we have our officers here at the Charlestown Police Department keeping us safe and fighting for us every single day, even if it takes 20 years to bring that to resolution. This case and this solving of this case is a testament to our zero tolerance policy for sexual assault or intimate partner violence in the City of Charlestown. It will not stand. Our officers will do everything they can to bring justice. And the work that has been done by the officers on this case and the full team that has brought this to resolution is a further testament to our compassion for our citizens and also for our dedicated sense of providing justice when needed. Thank you, Detective Brody, and everybody who's been involved in bringing this to a resolution.
All right, now we're going to bring up Detective Major Jason Brody to give some more details about the case.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate you guys. We'll go over some of the stuff with the case. I want to keep in mind the case is still ongoing. It is still pending, as you all know. Most of you were probably at the hearing yesterday. So we're not going to get into specifics about the case because at the end of the day, what we're after here is a successful criminal prosecution that lands Mr. Hollowell where we believe he belongs, and that's in the Department of Corrections. So we're going to give you just kind of a brief rundown of how everything unfolded with the case. And then at the end of that, we'll take a little quick Q&A and we'll try to answer some questions as best as we can. And then I'll talk about a couple other things that are relevant to this case. So one of the first things that I want to do, though, I feel like I owe it to some of the victims, is we didn't get the chance to notify all the victims that we had made an arrest and solved this case prior to it hitting the news cycle. And that was very traumatic for at least one of the victims. And that victim's spouse, and I apologize to that. I have finally been able to meet with them, but I'm sorry for the way that it unfolded to those victims. Sorry that it went that way, and I'm also sorry to Mr. Hollowell's family because we wanted to reach out to them as well before that happened so that we could notify them of what was going on, and that just didn't happen, and I hate that it turned out that way, but it was out of our control. But I want to make sure that those folks know how sorry that we are that they had to learn it that way. So on Monday, April 14th, 2003, 20 years and about 3 months ago, at approximately 5:44 a.m., our 911 dispatch center at the Charlestown Police Department received a 911 call from a person who was reporting the rape of a young female. And the female had also reported that her stepfather had been shot. And that incident occurred in about the 200 block of Highland Drive in Charlestown. If you drive up there now, the actual address in that 200 block of Highland Drive, the residence is no longer even there. It's gone. The stepfather, who I'll just refer to as victim 2, was about age 50 at the time of the crime. When officers arrived into the house where he was, they found him semi-conscious on the floor with a gunshot wound to the head. The female rape victim, who I'll refer to as victim number 1, was 13 years old. She had to flee that house with no clothes on to seek help, which, you know, as you guys are, I'm sure you're well aware, more trauma to that young girl. You know, not only did she have to survive that sexual assault and then witness what happened to her stepfather, but then she had to run out of there with not a stitch of clothes on and run for help. It's just very traumatic, very, very traumatizing to her. Officers arrived really quickly to the scene. Both victims were immediately transported to local hospitals, while other officers secured that scene to begin the crime scene processing. Victim number 2, who as a result of that gunshot wound to his head has battled a traumatic brain injury, and of course his quality of life has been severely altered since that day. He had a long period of time where he was in really good health and things were really good for him, and then there was another accident that he was involved in, and that compounded with that traumatic brain injury, and since then his quality of life has just been severely diminished. Victim number 1, now an adult, she's in her 30s. She cooperated with us from the first time that I reached out to her. She was happy that we were involved, that we were looking back into the case, and she's beyond ecstatic that we finally brought a suspect to justice. And not just a suspect, because in 2003, an arrest was made, but this time we've brought the right suspect to justice. We've brought the appropriate person, and she's super excited about that. As I said, during the initial investigation in 2003, a suspect was identified. He was arrested. That individual was later exonerated, and the exoneration for him occurred in about September of 2003, and that was through DNA evidence that did not link him to those offenses. It was one of those things where witnesses provide statements. It's just in this instance, it was a 13-year-old girl who'd just been through the most traumatic event of her lifetime that provided identifying information, and that information unfortunately led to the arrest of that individual who, for all intents and purposes, had nothing to do with this offense. But he was exonerated, rightfully and justfully so, around September of 2003. He was subsequently convicted in relation to that case for a separate charge that involved a different victim. So after about 2005, that case went cold. There was no more information that came in on it, no new leads. It just kind of went cold in all essence. We reopened the case in September of 2020 after I met personally with the wife of victim number 2 here at the police department. We had another shooting here in town, and she came in to talk to me. She had some concerns that maybe that shooting could have had something to do with the shooting of her husband and her daughter. So that's what prompted us to reopen the case. As Chief Wolf pointed out, in 2003, I was not a police officer. I did not live or have any affiliation with the city of Charlestown. So I remember vaguely seeing the news stories back in 2003 about this case, but I didn't really have a lot of knowledge or information about it. When I came onto the police department in 2004, I was a brand new officer, and I didn't really get involved in what the detectives were doing at the time and things like that. So meeting with that victim really gave me some good insight onto what had happened in this case as well, or, I'm sorry, that victim's wife. And it also made me want to get to work on this case and find the person or persons responsible. Since September of 2020, we've reached out to family members, and then we began investigating to follow up on new leads in the case. As you guys, I'm sure, are aware, if you've been in this field for very long, you know that there's been significant advancements in forensic DNA technology, which include genetic DNA analysis and research, that have occurred since 2003, and we utilize these advancements to our advantage in this investigation. Initially in 2003, about 65 items of evidence were collected, and since we reopened the case in 2020, we've collected about 52 additional items of evidence. The results of our reopening this case and our investigative findings to date for the offenses that occurred on April 14th, 2003 is the result of that is that we were able to arrest, and David Edward Hollowell has been charged with the offenses that we outlined above: attempted murder, rape, child molesting, and burglary. As you can see, we have a picture of Mr. Hollowell. That's from his 2000 Indiana driver's license, and that covers the year range of 2000 to 2004. And then that's his current mug shot from the Clark County Jail. So obviously you guys can see when we talk about genetic DNA analysis and research, some of that stuff was kind of new to us as investigators also, so we had to reach out to different folks and get some help. We reached out to a company called Parabon Nanolabs. You can feel free to look those up, and Detective Ledbetter's got some press releases that have contact information for Parabon. And they were great at helping us and informing us on what we need to do. There was some financial burdens that came with that. We reached out to an organization called Season of Justice. In the back of the room, Brad, and if I butcher your last name, I'm sorry, Brad Schleppy he's the executive director of Season of Justice. He came down this morning to be here for this. So if anybody has any questions for Brad, we have no problem with Brad coming up to answer questions. But what we did would not have been possible without the help of Parabon, without the help of Brad and his organization, and without the help of all the other people that were involved in this. Detective Ledbetter here at the police department was instrumental in this. He was actually here in 2003 and was involved in that case back then. So his role was very important and vital in this investigation. The Indiana State Police Laboratory Division, they were great to work with. I especially want to credit DNA analyst Susan Laney. She's just been phenomenal. We began speaking in 2020, and I'll tell you what, when I call, she answers. When I have a question, she answers. She does whatever it takes. She's never not been willing to do what we needed to do to make sure that we saw this case through. So she's been as invested as I've been, as invested as Detective Ledbetter has been, and she was also the original DNA analyst that worked on this case back in 2003. So this is a bit of closure for her as well. And then, there's a lot of other people that had a role in bringing this case to justice. Clark County Prosecutor Jeremy Mole, and Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Krista Willicke, who's now prosecuting the case. We appreciate all their assistance. And we wouldn't be where we were at without all those folks. So we appreciate everything that they've done. That, in a nutshell, is kind of what got us here to where we're at today. Again, I know that there's going to be questions about specific information related to the case, and that's just not information at this time that we can give out. The last thing that we want to do is jeopardize the successful criminal prosecution of Mr. Hollowell. On the same hand, we want to protect Mr. Hollowell's rights. He does have certain rights as a defendant, and we want to protect those rights. So I'll do my best to answer your questions. Just keep in mind, if you have a question that pertains to specifics about the case or about him being criminally charged, it's probably not something that I'll be able to answer. Okay?
You mentioned the advancements in DNA.
Yes.
Can you just explain what that means and really how much that does help?
Oh, it's super helpful. So, back in 2003, DNA was still being collected in a lot of cases by drawing blood from someone. Touch DNA was almost not really a thing. And you fast forward to now, we don't collect DNA through drawing a person's blood, very rarely. We do what we call buccal swabs. It's just an oral swab of the inner cheek. Touch DNA is a big thing for us. We have a lot of crime scenes and a lot of investigations that we solve just through touch DNA, where maybe, a person walked up and put their hand on this, and we are able to find out that they did that, and we swab that, and we get touch DNA, and we send that off for collection, and we solve crimes that way. And genetic genealogy, things like that, those things didn't exist in 2003. You didn't have these companies where individuals uploaded DNA profiles and then have other companies that were able to track that down to family members and relatives and things like that. And we have those capabilities now. And when we reopened this case, it was one of the things was that we were going to use whatever tools that we had at our disposal to try to bring closure to these victims. And in this instance, genetic genealogy or genetic DNA analysis, genetic DNA research, there's several different phrases for it, but that was one of the tools that we utilized to bring this case to closure and bring someone to justice.
What was it about this case that made you decide to reopen it and invest all these resources into it?
Well, it's the fact that you have this young girl who was traumatized, who, like I said, was sexually assaulted, witnessed her stepfather being shot right in front of her eyes. I mean, I can't imagine being in her shoes. And then you just have the fact that a very violent, heinous offense occurred here in the city of Charlestown. And we're, for the most part, we're a quiet community. I mean, we have our share of criminal offenses just like other community, but we don't have cases where individuals will break into a person's house, sexually assault a young girl, and then shoot that young girl's stepfather. And then it's the fact that her stepfather went into that room to try to protect his stepdaughter, and then he was shot and his life altered. And, those things are all personal to us. We're humans like everybody else, and we read and see those things, and that hits home with us.
Do you have any reaction to Hollowell's attorney trying to get the DNA evidence going out? The judge denied that motion the other day.
Yeah, I mean, my reaction, I'm happy with the ruling. I look forward to presenting the case, in conjunction with the prosecuting attorney to a jury if that's where we end up at. I look forward to that day. There's not really a reaction. I mean, that's part of what the defense attorney's job is, and I know the defense attorney, he's a good defense attorney, he's a good person, and I have no, that's what his job is, and I understand that, and I'm not mad at him over some of the arguments he made, and I think the judge made the right decision. I agree with that, obviously. And, you know, that's just part of this process. But we look forward to presenting the evidence that we have to a jury here in Clark County.
What was it like for you to be able to tell this family that you've made an arrest?
Emotional. That's probably the best way. Yeah.
I do have a question for
Sure.
Mayor Hodges, if she's, you mentioned that Charlestown has a zero tolerance for sexual assault and intimate partner violence. Are you able to talk about some of the resources available for community members who unfortunately might be victims?
Absolutely. We established this formal policy a few years ago because, as Detective Brody said, this is a quiet community, and we do not want you to bring that kind of violent crime here. We absolutely will not tolerate it. And so we do have resources available. Our police officers, Detective Brody being one of those, they work with the Center for Women and Families through various trauma-informed training about how to reach out to sexual assault survivors and domestic violence survivors. We also have on staff a social worker, community liaison, Courtney Rodwig, who all of our police officers carry her contact information with them so that when they respond to a call that is related to those kinds of offenses, they give the contact information to the victims so that they can reach out to our social worker for follow-up services so that they can begin that process of healing.
To get back to your question, ma'am, I'm sorry. It was emotional, but it was also rewarding. Seeing the smile on that young lady's face when we got to tell her, and I drove to her house the night that we arrested Mr. Hollowell and told her in person. That was a very rewarding feeling, but it's not rewarding for me. I'm happy that we were able to bring that to her. She's ecstatic. She's so appreciative of all the work that everyone has done. She's appreciative of Season of Justice, Parabon, the Indiana State Police Laboratory, you know, myself, Detective Ledbetter, just everybody involved. She can't express her gratitude enough that people got back involved and that they cared about her and that they cared about her stepdad. I met with the stepdad and his wife on Sunday, and they're very appreciative. I talked to her yesterday after the hearing. The wife, she's very happy. She's overcome with emotion. Obviously, after 20 years, that we finally have what we believe is the right suspect behind bars, where hopefully he will stay. So.
Would it be possible to provide kind of a breakdown of, like, with the DNA analysis, really how you kind of got from, like, reopening this, like, to where we are today, like, with, I don't know how much you can say, but, like.
Yeah, I mean, what I can just say is that we used the genetic research that we had at our disposal. I don't really want to get into the specifics of how we linked Mr. Hollowell to the offenses. The probable cause affidavit was out there. It has been unsealed now, so if someone doesn't have a copy of that, you can obtain that from the courthouse, and it's got that information in it. Anything else? All right. Our contact information is here, myself and Chief Wolf. If you guys do leave and you have an additional question later, feel free. You can shoot us an email, and we'll do our best to get you an answer. Maybe a question that we can't answer, again, but we'll tell you if we can or can't answer it. Do you guys have any questions for Brad? All right. All right. Thank you, folks.
All right, thank you, everybody, for coming out. That concludes our press conference. Like Detective Brody said, if you all have any follow-up questions, we'll do our best to answer anything that you have, as long as it doesn't interfere with the prosecution of the case. Myself, my contact information and Detective Brody's contact information is up here on the board, so be sure to take that down and reach out to us if you need anything. All right, thank you all.